in a very challenging time of our life. For the government, this has dual imperatives, as both the life of the citizen and their livelihoods are both under stake. During the corona phase, the conundrum lies ahead of policymakers is the redevelopment of the economy. It is a matter of great concern to manage this depressed GDP growth, where the government revenues are declining, and at the same time, new ways needs to be devised to boost the investors' confidence to improve revenue collection. Today, the discussion will further help us to understand on how monitoring and evaluation can help in improving these prospects to improve productivity. And also, since we have senior government officials with us, we would like to know that how government serves citizens in different ways, and for the efficient functioning of the services, programs and schemes of the government, what kind of robust mechanism needs to be devised in terms of effective monitoring and control. We also, after this COVID era, it is envisaged that every policy action is required to have some more careful review mechanism with a robust framework so that we will be able to bring real opportunities for developing an Atmanirbhar Bharat. We also see that there will be some more structured policy measures which are designed and implemented and which could help us to prepare for a challenging future and to improve our national development strategies towards long-term competitiveness and resilience. Also, we are going to discuss more on the multiple benefits which MM monitoring and evaluation will be going to bring. For example, we can see that there will be some more policy coordination among other state actors. It will also help in creating more transparency in service delivery. And it also helps in setting up and establishing the key performance indicators, which we see that which will give us more comparative performance reporting. But here we require to have a strong understanding of how we are going to construct this theory of change. So in my opinion, that we have to focus more on three particular aspects whenever we are discussing more on the policy. First is on equity, second is on efficiency, third is on effectiveness, and overall what we can see there is the productivity. And that's why this program is being organized by National Productivity Council. So whatever policies are now going to be devised, it should take care of the productivity parameter in the policy intervention. And I firmly believe that this cannot be better explained by Professor other than Professor Hema Swaminathan. So I welcome first Professor Hema Swaminathan in this program. Professor Hema Swaminathan is from the Center for Public Policy at IIM Bangalore. Further, this policy, in this policy deliberation, we are going to discuss more on how it is going to be constructed. So, for example, any policy, it should have three more important parameters. First is it should be plausible, it should be testable, and it should be feasible. And I think that to deliberate more on it, Dr. Alok Mishra, Director from Development, Monitoring and Evaluation Office at NITI Aayog. He is a civil servant and a very well-known face in the administrative circle. He is an alumnus of IIT Delhi and now the Director of Apex Institution, the NITI Aayog in the country. We look forward to hearing from you, sir. And I would request you to highlight the role of NITI Aayog in this nation building process. Joining us today is Shri Vikram Pagaria. He is an IRS officer, currently the Joint Commissioner Income Tax, and a very accomplished professional. He has many laurels to his name. He is an overall gold medalist and he is an alumnus of IIT Delhi. And he has recently returned back from Harvard University, USA after completing his post-graduation master's program. So we also look forward to hear from you. And I would like to especially welcome our Director General of NPC, Sri A.K. Jha ji. He is an IAS officer and an additional secretary to the Government of India, with whose constant motivation and support we are able to organize all these webinars. With this brief theme introduction, I invite our Regional Director of National Productivity Council at Gandhinagar, Sri Shirish Paliwal ji, to kindly give the welcome remarks. Opening remarks to you, sir. Sir, you are on mute.
Am I audible? Am I audible? Audible, yeah. Thank you, Amitosh. Thank you very much. Very good afternoon to everyone. Namaskar. On behalf of National Productivity Council, Regional Directorate, Gandhinagar, Gujarat, we welcome the esteemed panel of guests on the subject. To begin with, Shri A.K. Jhaji, IAS, Director General, National Productivity Council, who has been kind enough to grace the occasion today here in webinar. He has been very supportive for organizing these kind of webinars across the country. Next, Dr. Alok Mishra, Director, Development Monitoring and Evaluation, Niti Aayog, and Professor Hema Swaminathan, Indian Institute of Management, Bengaluru. We welcome you, ma'am, today here. And I think joining shortly with us, Shri Vikram Pagaria ji, IRS Joint Commissioner Income Tax. Friends, NPC has been providing recommendations in all the sectors of economy for improvement in policies, processes, practices, and systems through its consulting, training, research, monitoring and evaluation services, and propagate productivity culture in the country. In fact, for the monitoring and evaluation services, we believe NPC is one of the foremost and pioneer organization who is undertaking, I think, hundreds of studies every year. You name the government department and NPC must have done the work for them. So whether Ministry of Tourism or Ministry of Monetary Affairs, everywhere if you see the schemes of government are being evaluated by National Productivity Council. NPC India has been able to successfully connect to thousands of participants across the country and the globe through its webinars and other digital media on subject matters covering industry, agriculture, human resource, IT, yoga, etc. And we are pleased to inform you that the NPC came out as one of the foremost organizations in the country. In fact, internationally also it is being told that during this pandemic, the NPC was one of the organizations which was seen was propagating the digital tools for learning in terms of digital propagation and dissemination during the pandemic. Today also presently 3 webinars are presently ongoing right now from 3 p.m. So the NPC has been undertaking many monitoring and evaluation for various government departments for both schemes and projects. It has been our experience that there are 3 facts which I personally believe that I have been involved in many evaluation projects. In fact, in the Gujarat, we took an assessment some 15-20 years back for all the departments, and based upon that, the then CM of Gujarat State, Honorable Prime Minister of India, at that time, his Principal Secretary to give the assignment to NPC for assessing all the departments for its schemes, for its charters, and we created a roadmap for the improvements, and that was implemented very successfully. So these 3 things which I have learned from our experience, executing the projects. The first, that the projects or things which are not measured or evaluated as per scientific methodology either may not deliver as per expectations or may not continuously improve its performance. That is for sure. So that is the first thing which we would like to mention here. The things which are not measured, not evaluated as per scientific methodology, forget that they will improve continuously. Second, the second fact which we believe, each evaluation or the monitoring of the project is unique. Each is unique for the desired results, and strategies methodology needs to be customized for each evaluation. And the third fact which we believe, the scheme promoters, mostly these scheme promoters are the government department who are spending the taxpayers' money. They have always one challenge for reliable information and the dynamic support to steer projects effectively. Both monitoring and evaluation are data-driven. So we believe in this digital world, the tools and techniques and framework can be supported by new EH tools. Because nowadays, just now we have just taken an assignment in Gujarat for strengthening the Chief Minister's apprenticeship scheme. So we believe that only EH tools are being applied there to know the facts, what is going on, and how the scheme promoters can be helped to know the status of improvement and what corrective actions have to be taken. So we are witnessing how real-time COVID-19 information and related projects help the authorities to dynamically change strategies to deal with the pandemic. So friends, I would like to mention that during the current pandemic, next 1 year, it will be very challenging for the authorities. NPC is providing an e-pass framework in which, electronically they can submit for giving us the evaluation inquiries for the monitoring and evaluation projects. This e-pass is available on our website, which can be utilized by the stakeholders. And presently, many organizations are utilizing the e-pass framework of the NPC. We have the esteemed panelists from the academia, from the revenue, from the Niti Aayog, very aptly selected for the discussions. Director General of NPC India is also present with us. NPC would also ensure that learnings from this webinar are made useful to the relevant departments through documentation and propagation to the stakeholders. Friends, I once again welcome all the guests and participants. Thank you very much and wish you all the best. Over to Amitosh.
Thank you very much, sir, for your opening remarks. Next, I would like to request our Director General, Sri Arun Kumar Jhaji, to kindly give words of motivation to the participants. Over to Sri Arun Kumar Jhaji.
Thank you, Amitosh. Thank you, Paliwal ji. I welcome all the three speakers, Dr. Hema, Mr. Alok Misra, and Mr. Pagadia ji. This is really a very, very important subject. While I speak, I remember that whenever we wanted to go to the next plan, and we had to get it, evaluated by the third party. But as Mr. Paliwal was saying, very, very important. What happens in our over-enthusiasm or due to our over-confidence, we generally believe that we know much more about the shortcomings of these schemes than the person who is going to evaluate, than the organizer who is going to evaluate. Like Mr. Alok Misra, he is already in demo. Main purpose of that organization used to be the evaluation of the scheme. But unfortunately, many of us used to get it evaluated from outside, not from them, because they were busy. And we were also very happy that they are busy. Now I remember after it was reconstituted, his DG met me, and I told him the same thing which I am repeating here, that there is a very, very big importance of third-party evaluation. And as a implementer of the scheme in the same ministry, we develop some kind of biasness towards any scheme. We always think that, and most of the time, not 99%, but 100% time, we think that this scheme should continue. With this mindset, we get the scheme evaluated. And let me tell you, we have got the centrally sponsored scheme and central sector scheme is worth rupees 10 lakh crore. 10 lakh, you can imagine. And I am sure I am not aware about the state government scheme, but it must be half of this total. So total 15 lakh crore worth of schemes are being evaluated in a very, very professional manner, let me admit, and I am very sorry about it. And I am also pleased with Dr. Hema, please forgive me if I am saying anything bad about any institution. It is not with this intention. I have got several schemes evaluated by the FS organizer, including IIM. Of all the three IIM, they bring out obvious truth. The scheme should be implemented in the right manner. Scheme should have this thing. Scheme should have. Instead of saying what exactly is needed in this scheme, we get a list of universal truth, obvious statement, which does not help us at all. So, Mr. Alok Misra and IIM, CREAR, and all such organizations, including mine, NPC, we need to embark upon something very concrete, what really should be done. Whether the scheme implementing department or ministry should be part of the evaluation or not. That is one. Second, whether concurrent evaluation is required or not. Because many a time, concurrent evaluation is not their part of the schemes. I remember only very big schemes of rural development do have this kind of concurrent evaluation. Whether that is helpful or not. Let me tell you, that becomes more perfunctory. Concurrent evaluation in government, actually it is let me tell you, let me admit, it is very difficult in the main ministry to bring out the real criticism about any scheme. We somehow we make it a prestige issue not to bring out any such criticism. You know, there are many a times schemes, guidelines are not the part of the cabinet. All smart bureaucrats, they first get the scheme accepted by the cabinet, and later on they formulate guidelines. That is another. I also belong to the same. So that any time I can change the guidelines. While most of the time it is good, but sometimes it is very bad also. The point I'm trying to make that it is very much required, and organizations like DEMO, the third party, at least we'll have little bit of distance from them. Although we will influence them also, I'm aware. But at least there will be something that I may not be that familiar with that. Sometimes he may or may not be available. Actually, point I'm trying to make that we have to have a robust system of evaluation. And how should we achieve it? It should be our prime importance, because the scheme worth 15 lakh rupees is involved. And it is very, very difficult in any government, because this is my 35 years of service, I'm telling you, to start a new scheme. And it is equally difficult to shut down a new scheme. So this is the tragedy of our system. So I'm very happy that this kind of topic has been chosen, and we have got very, very good speakers, and I am sure that they will throw good light on us, and we will be benefited by that. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you very much to Director General Sir your inaugural address and giving some more insights from the government perspective. I'm sure that the points which you have raised will set the motion of today's discussions, because rightly pointed out regarding that how policies are formulated and where the monitoring and evaluation part is. And that's why, like, when I was going through with the discussions, and like Professor Hema Swaminathan is here with us, and she will be deliberating more on it. For example, if you see the other countries like the Australia Productivity Council is doing a lot of monitoring and evaluation type of projects, and their focus is basically on equity, efficiency, and effectiveness, which we may be lacking in our own policy formulations. With that focus, I would now like to request our next speaker, Professor Hema Swaminathan, to kindly express her views and share the presentation.
Thank you very much, Amitosh, for having me on here. It's a real pleasure. And thank you also, Parimalji and Arun Kumar Jhaji, for your opening remarks and for setting the tone. I think both of you are sort of laid out the ground for my own thoughts. I will keep it brief, and I think we will have a very good discussion after this. Amitosh, if you could please share the presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Allow me some time. I'll just share it.
So I'm going to talk very briefly while Amitosh is pulling that up. I'll just give you the outline of the presentation. I'm going to keep it brief, and I'm going to focus much more on evaluation and a little less on the monitoring aspect of it. Both of these, in my mind, are terribly important and connected, but they are distinct from each other. I think some of the issues that arise in India and also other countries, I mean, some countries I think are ahead in terms of, say, partnering with evaluation experts, but some countries are not. I think some of the confusion also arises because monitoring and evaluation is often talked of in the same breath, right? So that's sort of the very broad outline. Amitosh, next slide, please. Yeah, so this is just the outline as to why we need monitoring evaluation, the key differences, what really is an impact evaluation, and the challenges to impact evaluation. Next slide. Yeah. So why do we need an M&E? I think Amitosh sort of laid this out really well, but I want to emphasize that nowadays, I think all stakeholders, including citizens, are increasingly wanting accountability from the government, and the government is also knows that the pressure of expectations, but there are far fewer resources also at hand. So it's really about making the most efficient use of our resources, the most effective use of our resources, and I guess in lots of other ways, translating that into higher productivity. And then the need for continuous improvement. This point was made earlier in the opening remarks, that unless we have monitoring and evaluation in somewhat real time, we cannot be constantly also improving our work. To show convincing evidence that a particular policy works, right? How do we say intervention A has actually led to outcome B? What is evidence-based policy making? That's what we would call it, rather than just anecdotal-based policy making. And then you need to show that a scheme has worked so that you can also get political, financial, and support from the citizens, right? So these are some of the very broad reasons why we would want to do an M&E, undertake an M&E process. Next slide, please. Right. So I want to distinguish, often monitoring and evaluation is put within the same unit. They are interconnected, but they're not exactly the same. So monitoring is something collecting real-time data. You're talking about are certain targets being met, are indicators being collected. So if we even talk about this current pandemic, it's about how many beds are there, is a private hospital sharing 50% of their beds for COVID emergencies. Those are monitoring kinds of data, right? So you can have monitoring is more an internal process. It's done by the scheme implementers because they are closest to the scheme. They can tell you has so many kilometers of roadways been laid, have so many midday meals being provided, are X kilos of dry rations being provided to the school. That's a monitoring part of the monitoring, including it can also look at cost, it can look at financial parameters. What monitoring misses is the why question, right? Or it misses the cause and effect question. It's perfectly possible to have a very good monitoring system without an evaluation, but you cannot have a very good evaluation framework, or you cannot undertake a very good evaluation without good monitoring data. So Amitosh, next slide. So to think about this somewhat in a pictorial fashion, monitoring is an ongoing continuous activity. It can mainly be driven by internal activity, and it's sort of responsibility of the scheme managers and continuous feedback to improve your performance. Whereas evaluation, you think of it from a slightly different point of view. Evaluation can also be continuous, but the way we think of evaluation as being continuous is a bit different from monitoring, and I'll elaborate a little more on it when I come to the when do we do an evaluation. And evaluation, in my mind, has to be done by an independent or an external agency because, as was very rightly pointed out, someone who's very close to the scheme, there is an obvious conflict of interest. And also evaluation, I think, should be done because it's a technical field and it should be done in a scientific way. You should involve people who have the necessary expertise, right? And that you work with the internal team together so that you design your evaluation in a way that it gives you accurate results. And then the feedback of evaluation is also very important for continuous improvement. Next slide, please. So monitoring cannot answer this key question of causality or attribution. So in the sense, it cannot tell you why a particular policy was successful or not successful, right? It can tell you why was that particular policy well implemented or not. It can tell you what the bottlenecks were, right? Without having this information, you can't understand very well how an evaluation sometimes is. Sometimes an evaluation will come and say, okay, this scheme failed, but you might not know the reasons for it, right? Or the reasons might be, as was said, maybe just a universal truth, which seems very obvious. But to be able to go beyond obvious, you'll need the monitoring data. You'll have to fully analyze monitoring data, perhaps even rely on qualitative information that will help us really understand why a particular evaluation worked or did not work. Was there a difference in context? Was maybe the population, target population, not chosen well? So you need all of that monitoring information, right? So you need the information on the indicators to really understand the evaluation results. So why a policy performs in a particular way is what monitoring data can tell us, and the success or the failure of the policy is what an evaluation is trying to get at. Next slide, please, Amitosh. So when we say evaluation, it's also known as impact evaluation. So if you read the broader literature on evaluation, you'll see people talking also about impact evaluation. So here, what we are saying is that we are trying to see if a policy or an intervention, what kind of impact it's had on at various levels, right? So you can think of it as individuals, communities, institutions, or groups, right? So a scheme like NREGA will obviously impact an individual, it'll impact the household, it'll impact the community where it is, maybe the village or the community of people who are eligible for those kinds of job employment programs. How will it affect other institutions that you may not have thought of, and how will it affect the larger group or at the national or the subnational unit level, right? So in an impact evaluation, we are trying to see that the evidence of success can be convincingly attributable to the program itself, right? Often we can say, yes, midday meal schemes were rolled out, and that is why the children are doing so well. How do we know that the children are not doing well because of something else? Maybe because that year in that particular district, the school, maybe the district collector decided to bring in additional programs of support, right? Can you say that my policy or my scheme alone was contributing to the success of this? How can we tease that out? And often in the real life, where there are 1,001 schemes that are operating simultaneously, that teasing out effect is not possible. But a good evaluation framework will help us get there. Maybe it will not be able to tease out to the last digits. I would be very suspicious of, say, an evaluation study which said that it increased by 0.04% at with a 99 degree of confidence, right? Sometimes those kinds of numbers may not be believable, but can you say with a certain degree of confidence that you think that your particular scheme led to an output? Also, with a rigorous evaluation, you can build it on evidence, not on ideology or dogma, right? You cannot say, I am sure that the scheme has succeeded because I believe in the scheme, right? While your belief might be driven by very altruistic or very strong sort of motives, it may not be translatable. In the particular context, it might not have worked well. So a good policymaker with good evidence is also able to back away and say, okay, maybe the policy intention was good, but maybe there was something problematic in the design. Next slide, please. Right. So what we are trying to here with impact evaluation is look at it for understanding the impact of the cause or understanding the effect. So technically, we would think as the effect as the difference between what did happen and what would have happened without no cause, right? So Amitosh, if you just bring up the counterfactual point. So we often talk about also what would have happened in this world of a policy if the policy had not actually taken place, right? So let's take the example of a midday meal scheme and say that with the midday meal scheme, you see a particular district, the children are doing really well. There's an improvement in wasting. There is an improvement in cognitive sort of scores, etc., right? Can you say that if we actually want to evaluate the scheme, then we will need to know what would have happened to that state of the world if the policy intervention had not happened, right? So what we need is to try and understand the state of the world, which looks exactly like what the policy intervention has taken place, but without that key injection, right? So what we really need is a clone. And this is what we call a counterfactual. Right? Amitosh, if you can just bring up the counterfactual point, please. Yeah, right. So what would have happened to our outcomes if there was no cause? So that very, in a stripped down fashion, is what impact evaluation tries to do. It sounds simple, but it can get complicated in real life in terms of how we would actually try to get at a counterfactual and how we will try to create that when we are actually trying to roll out a policy. Right? Next slide, please. So this is just a sort of a cheeky take on evaluation, and it's saying that we cannot fund your proposal because the link between spinning cloth and the fall of the British Empire is not clear to us, right? So Gandhi's proposal for whatever is not being accepted because they said we don't. So it's really trying to talk about the importance of trying to get at causality in the real life world, and that it's becoming much more important now than ever. Right? Next slide, please. And when do we think of an evaluation? You know, really, an evaluation, if you're thinking of a scientific evaluation and you're thinking of how to measure your outcomes or your impact carefully, then usually the evaluator should come on board when the policy is actually being designed, right? Or as you're thinking through how the policy is going to work, what we usually use what is called a theory of change, where we say these are our inputs, these are the sets of activities, there are a set of assumptions around these activities, and these will translate into outputs, and these will translate into outcomes, and which will further then give us a slightly longer term impact. If the evaluator or the team that is doing an evaluation is part of the thinking process, then it becomes much easier at the end to also do your evaluation. Not that your evaluation will happen right at the end, but it can help identify, say, what are the key assumptions that you're thinking about. An evaluator can also help you think about maybe some of the intended outcomes and long-term impact. Maybe you can think through some of the unintended consequences of your policy so that you can then control for it in some way. You can start thinking about baseline data. You can start thinking about how you create this counterfactual, which is usually achieved by creating a target group and a control group. So it can be done in a very, very systematic way. Some of the best evaluations worldwide are when the policymaker, the government have usually collaborated with an evaluation team as they are starting to roll it out, so that the evaluation is then part of also the part of schemes like certain kinds of schemes. This is usually not the norm. Evaluations are still possible though, right? Many places it's not possible for policymakers to involve evaluators, or the need for an evaluation is thought through much later. They can still operate. We can still do evaluation schemes. But one just has to know that this might be a second best alternative, but that's fine, right? A second best alternative is still possible and it's still considered good enough, right? Evaluators, I think one of the key responsibilities of both policymakers and evaluators is to prioritize. Not everything that can be evaluated should be. You've got to prioritize it. You've got to see, or what is it that you want to evaluate? So even though it is delayed, if you think you want an evaluation, you should bring an evaluator on board. Right? Next slide, please, Amitosh. Well, I think I have several bureaucrats here who will tell me much better how findings are used. But from my experience of having worked with bureaucrats, I mean, one of course knows that schemes and policies are usually political decisions, right? Sometimes there's very little room for maneuverability. So as an evaluator, you will give feedback. How well that gets taken on board may or may not happen. As was also mentioned, sometimes schemes can be used for scaling up, but so you would scale up in a way that meets the goals of the schemes. If you find that your smaller pilot did not work well, Usually evaluations also happen at a pilot stage. They are almost never used for closure because it's political suicide to try and close a scheme, because you will be affecting a lot of constituencies and stakeholders. They can be used for incremental improvements. Sometimes they may not be used immediately, and often they are never used. They are just sitting somewhere in a file because there was a very inconvenient finding, or they found there wasn't any impact. But I mean, this is something that probably both Alok and Vikram might touch upon based upon their own workings of the experience with the government, as with other audience members. Next slide, please, Amitosh. The major challenges with evaluation are political. And when I say political, some of the best evaluations and the way to do them would be, say, if you start off with one group and then you extend it gradually. Sometimes those are not acceptable at a political level. Everybody wants to serve their constituency first. So they are like, no, we will roll it out to everybody. How can I tell you that the scheme will be rolled out in a staggered fashion? Though often an evaluator's dream is to say, stagger it so that I can actually gather the data in a way in which it is feasible. Also, evaluators' advice may not always be palatable from a political constituency framework, and these are realities that you live with. And then there are changes in scheme design. There could be implementation roadblocks. So the evaluator, I think one of the key things is that although an evaluator may come with a researcher sort of background, they also have to be tuned to some of the challenges that happen in real life, right? So how would you solve those? So you've got to be sort of quick on your feet, maybe make a few compromises on techniques without losing the overall rigor of what is it that you're trying to achieve, right? Also, the big problem with evaluation and monitoring both is that you need a good process for collecting data. I think data does get collected, but it just sits somewhere in some dusty file, or it's administrative data which no one really accesses, right? So systematic data collection, which can be accessible, and how is it analyzed? So you've got to have the analysis plan built in. Otherwise, you spend lakhs of rupees just collecting data that nobody is ever going to use, which is a colossal waste of taxpayer money, if you ask me, right? So you should prioritize the kinds of data to be collected and have an analytical plan. And even for monitoring the kinds of data that would be collected and where would that feed in, right? Sometimes you can do great work with just limited data. So don't waste time and resources collecting data that will never get used. Evaluation is expensive. So again, prioritize what needs to be evaluation. What is the main intervention which you think will lead to a particular impact? Have you identified 2 or 3 long-term outcomes, 2 or 3 long-term impacts that you really want to say can be attributable to your scheme, and then collect along those lines? Otherwise, you could be collecting data about everything, right? And then there are other ethical questions that sometimes crop up with monitoring and evaluation, particularly when one talks about, RCTs are now the flavor, particularly after last year's Nobel Prize, right? Can one go on to do RCTs? RCTs are often considered the gold standard for evaluation. I won't necessarily say that has to be the only model. It is a good model, but it is a model that also has lots of conundrums. How do you choose your control? How do you choose your target population? When everybody is needy, do you flip a coin? So those are ethical questions that come up. And then sometimes you've also got to figure out if a scheme is not doing really too well, can you actually really close it, right? Or is it also serving some other needs that you might not have been able to capture through your evidence or your evaluation framework? Next slide, please, Amitosh. So M&E in India, I think we are sort of at a nascent stage, but we are really building up for M&E. I think even in the last, even in recent times over the last decade, we've sort of developed M&E capacity, and we are moving in the right direction. I think this is the right time to turn it also over to Alok, who is director of DMEO at NITI. So I'm very pleased he's here with us. So I'll turn it over to Alok, and he can take it from here. Just a quick question to Amitosh. Amitosh, I see there are a couple of one question that's addressed to me in the chat. Are you going to moderate it and we take it right at the end? Or are we going to have discussions right at the end of it? It's up to you.
At the end, so that all the things will be covered up because of the paucity of time.
Okay.
Everyone completes his presentation.
Sure. That's fine. Works for me. I did quickly want to add that Alok is also an alumnus of IIM Bangalore. You forgot to mention that.
Yes. Thanks, Professor Hema. Jha sir, Shirish ji, Amitosh. Amitosh, I think you'll have to transfer me the
Yes.
sharing icon so that I can share my presentation.
Correct, sir.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, can you sort of see my presentation?
Sir, kindly share your presentation. It is not yet shared.
Okay, just one second. Yes, sir. Is it shared now? Can everybody?
Yeah. Just make it full. Yeah. It is fine, sir.
Okay.
You may start.
Great. Thanks a lot. On that note, what I'm going to do is that, especially. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is that to cover that, what is it that Development Monitoring and Evaluation Office, which actually came into being in 2015, that is doing, and then what is the current ecosystem that we have in place, and going forward, what are the kind of strategies that we are following for developing M&E ecosystem in this country. So briefly, DMEO came into existence in 2015, and before that we had Independent Evaluation Office and Program Evaluation Office. Now, Program Evaluation Office, since 1950s, it did evaluate programs, it did come out with reports, and those reports were discussed at the Development Commissioners meeting in Delhi every year. To what extent their recommendations were used to change policies or make some kind of effective changes, that no study is there, so it may be difficult to say. But Program Evaluation Office did exist, with its regional offices, close to 500 staff. In 2010, we came up with Independent Evaluation Office, and thereafter in 2015, it was merged together. And so going forward, the DMEO's grand vision is to improve sustainable outcome and impacts. Now, what is it that DMEO is doing? So what we do is that first thing is that outcome-based budgeting. So, this is called Output Outcome Monitoring Framework, and I'll talk about it in slight detail. So, as part of it, what we do is that we develop, in consultation with the ministries, output and outcome indicators, and then sort of we have a dashboard. That's where we populate it. And what is the idea? I'll just sort of discuss in detail. The second big thing that we do is the sector reviews for the PMO. So currently we are sort of, doing sector reviews for 12 infrastructure and 3 social sector. They're being monitored by PM through a dashboard that is being maintained by us. Third thing is that what we have undertaken is, this big thing, which is, the evaluation of the centrally sponsored schemes. And that's for the 15th Finance Commission cycle. And, these are, or we also undertake schemes which are requested by the ministries or the department or the PMO. We also take a quick assessment of schemes. Other things, performance notes, I'll slightly discuss about it, what is performance note, and then EFCs and SFCs, 29 global indices that we are getting into it, and we are going to monitor, especially given the fact that some of these global indices may be based on, perceptions, and then the capacity building, which remains the big task that we have to undertake given the kind of deficits that exist in this area. So briefly, output outcome monitoring framework now is a part of the budgetary document. In 2019, 20, and 2021, it was appended to the budget document that was late in the parliament. what is an output outcome monitoring framework? Basically, what we are trying to do is that once you undertake any interventions, you define measurable outcomes, and then you monitor them. And then the idea is that once which are performing, they're scaled up, and which are non-performing, they're scaled down. And it's easier said than done, because even defining these sort of indicators becomes a pretty Herculean task. And this happens because you may not have baseline data, you may not have data architecture in place. So collecting those outcome indicators or output indicators becomes so much more difficult. But DMO, we work with ministry jointly to sort of define these indicators, and then we have based on our collaboration with the DOE, we do the evaluation of schemes. That's what it is. So once you have an outlay for schemes, both central sector and centrally sponsored schemes, outputs and outcomes are there, and we have developed these relevant output and outcome indicators, and then these sort of indicators are displayed on a dashboard for which the passwords are given to the ministry, and the ministries to fill in this data. So that's what comes as part of the budget. Now, what is, EFC, CSFC, or PIB or DIB? This is one way where we start defining. This is the first, when an expenditure finance committee proposal, comes to us, or a SFC or a PIB comes to us. What we do is that, our task is to define, these output and outcome monitoring indicators, and that's where we sort of, define it, and that's what, that's when the ministries start sort of measuring them. And when these schemes are to be continued, the independent evaluation is compulsory, and that's what has been necessary, made compulsory by the DOE, Department of Expenditure. As part of sector reviews, these are the sectors that we have been sort of for reviewing, and they are reviewed at the level of the PMO. We work with the concerned the vertical in Niti Aayog. We work with the concerned ministry, and that's then we come up with a fairly integrated manner, a kind of reform, roadmap for that, for that sector. That's what a sector review, dashboard for a PMO looks like. Coming to these evaluation of CSS studies that we have undertaken, this was, on the direction of the Finance Commission. And what we are doing is that as part of it, all the CSS schemes, the third-party evaluations are being conducted by us. As far as the central sector schemes are concerned, for that we assist these ministries in developing terms of references. But those central sector schemes are actually, the evaluation is got done by the individual ministries. These are the 10 packages. What we did is that we had 126 centrally sponsored scheme. We put them into 28 umbrella CSS sort of schemes, and then they were put in 10 10 packages, and then we sort of outsourced it for evaluation by third parties. Broad idea behind this CSS evaluation, which are more in nature of process evaluation, was that we do the top down analysis and the bottom up analysis from the scheme level up, and from the the sector goal and the ministry goal. Some of it, SDG do remain some kind of broad overarching goal. Similarly, national priorities India, that is a document produced by Niti Aayog, that remains one sort of guiding factor. Now, what are the issues? Some of the issues Professor Hema also brought out. Building a country's evaluation system is easier said than done. Is it a political challenge or a bureaucratic challenge? How do you sort of define incentives for both these main actors in the policy policy ecosystem? How do we get support of some of the key stakeholders? Department of Expenditure, because that's what have the Planning Commission came was transformed into Niti Aayog. All the budgetary allocations are done by Ministry of Finance, so they become the key stakeholders. Prime Minister's Office, Niti Aayog comes directly under the Prime Minister's Office. Some key ministries which have large outlays, public impact, rural development. Could we start with them? That's what should they be should they be the first kind of departments where in the way we should undertake it? When do you make evaluation studies public? Are we treating it more as a learning exercise, or we are interested in some kind of publicity? I would think otherwise, because it's a learning mechanism. How do you balance this learning with accountability? That again remains a challenge. Should we start with a scheme which is not performing very well, or should we start with something which is performing well, so that we sort of tell them that, okay, what is working, and then also show some what is not working? How do you generate credibility? Now, this was one question which was raised by Jha sir also, that how do you generate it? Professor Gonzalo, who is the founder of Coneval, the Mexico's evaluation system, he was here a few months ago, and he said, he was narrating stories that, initially he would come up with some of the best evaluation reports, but when he went to the ministries, so the ministries will say, okay, so what do I do with all those great reports? And none of them will get implemented. So, if you have ministry on board, then your recommendations are more likely to get implemented. But if they're not on board, then what do you do? So, then some kind of balancing, independence with sort of, credibility, both, these things, quite become very important. And that's what we have done, while we were doing the CSS evaluation, that we have taken ministry on board as far as the process is concerned, so that when the results come out, they are not taken, they're aware of that what has been going on, and how, what process we have taken. And we do realize that sometimes the ministries may have nuancical understanding of schemes, which, some of the third-party evaluators may not have. So to the extent that those knowledge gaps can be filled by the ministries, I think they are always welcome. But, that is not to say that we don't maintain our distance in terms of, what are the findings of the evaluation process. So should we be positive about evaluation? My understanding is that yes, Professor Hema has already highlighted about it, but, we need to be very clear that evaluation is one of the inputs in the public policy process. It can't be everything. To expect that evaluation will guide a change in policy, or, a discontinuation of policy, is probably too much to expect. My understanding is that, even if evaluation can make some difference, we have been successful. These are other activities that we carry out due to paucity of time. I'll not sort of get into it. We did some internal exercise on the kind of data system that exists in different ministries, and we did realize that some of the largest rural development, yes, did exceedingly well, but some other ministries with large allocations do not do so well. So we have fairly different sort of levels of maturity in the M&E ecosystem across the ministries, across the states. Professor Hema is, I'm Bangalore, is in Karnataka, and Karnataka was one of the front runner in terms of establishing Karnataka Evaluation Authority and then bringing out that evaluation policy. At the national level, we still don't have that kind of overarching policy. There are systemic challenges, there are, capacity, constraints that we have. And we realized during those 126, while we have been going through these third-party evaluation, which are being done by consultants, and we do realize that, even they do lack capacity. And we sort of, when we scan the academic institution, they have the capacity, but that's scattered throughout these academic institutions, but not in one, big basket that you get all these capacity. Obviously, data quality related issues have always been there. I'm not sort of going to get so much into it, because probably, the questions will follow. But the idea is that what we plan to do is that, we want to create demand for evaluation, because, if there's no demand, then sort of, nothing gets done. At the same time, we want to sort of create that kind of capacity to conduct, monitoring, monitoring and evaluation. When we distinguish between monitoring and evaluation, monitoring, yes, still we have done, we have improved. Some of the ministries are much, much better. Look at some of the schemes, which do pretty well as far as monitoring goes, right from Prime Minister Awas Yojana, NREGA. But in terms of evaluation, there's still a lot that needs to be done. And what we are trying to do is that even in external organizations, we do realize that there are issues that we need to address, and that's why we want to create these networks of formalized partnerships with knowledge institutions, with international organizations, because a lot of great capacity exists in international organization, and we want to catalyze that capacity that exists in international organization to sort of bring to our knowledge institutions, our ministries, state governments, so that that capacity can be developed. So that's what we are doing. We're not taking from a short-term reactive approach. We are going to go for it just because anybody gives us evaluation, we do it. Now we're going to, we're taking a more long-term kind of approach. We are going to focus on line ministries and state governments. And obviously we are going to we know that, our internal capacity may be limited. And that's why we want to leverage the capacity that may exist in the M&E ecosystem, both from the international organization and the academic institution. Some of them are excellent as far as monitoring and the evaluation capacity is concerned. So broad idea, yes, we don't have a policy, but that's one of the main big goal that we have. But below that, we are already working on toolkits and guidelines. M&E performance index, that's one thing that we are working on. Then capacity building, and then technology. Professor Jha sir pointed out that Shishir ji pointed out that technology. Monitoring is so much technology, data and technology intensive, and that's what we are working on, and research and innovation. M&E. So partnership remain key to our strategy. That's what I said, and we'll be sort of working with different organizations, both for joint research and field studies, knowledge exchange, survey-related expertise, methodological expertise. We are getting sort of staff seconded to DMO from international organization. At the level of, education institution will be working with some of the short-term curriculum development, training program for DMO team, for the bureaucrats, in the state and the central academies, online courses. So these are big ideas that we are working on, and going ahead, we think that, it's a long road, but, with the cooperation from everybody, we'll achieve our goal. Thank you so much. Thanks. And over to Vikram now.
Thank you very much, sir, for such an elaborate presentation. I'm sure that the framework, though we can say that the M&E policy is not there, but we can say that the interest is there. I can see that around 8 participants are there in today's webinar. So this shows that this is a topic of interest for many people in the country.
Yes.
So we will take the questions afterwards, but I would request Mr. Vikram to kindly share his slides, or start with the presentation.
I do not have any slide. I just wanted to know whether I am audible.
You are audible, but your video is not coming.
Is the video?
No, we can see the video. Yeah, video is there.
Video is coming, no problem.
Okay.
Please
so
share your presentation.
I do not have a presentation. I have 4 or 5 points which I'll narrate. Basically, I am a taxman. I am working in the income tax department since the past 10 years. Based on my work in the department, we generally implement policies. We do not frame policies. So I wanted to give my perspectives on how policies should be. I believe that if there is a good policy initially, then and its implementation is also thought of in the beginning, it would be good. For example, my first message is that whenever there is a policy evaluation, it should also be taken into account whether there are conditions which are conducive to implementation of that policy or not. For example, I wanted to give an example of the RTI Act, the Right to Information Act. When I came into service, before coming into the government, I had a very firm belief that it is a very noble act, and we should help people what information is already there in the public domain. But when we came to the department, we got to know that there are no separate human resources which are laid out to implement the Right to Information Act. As the tax administrators, we have to collect revenue, we have to do general administration, and over it we have to also provide information that is being called under Right to Information Act. Now this becomes very difficult because there is a lot of workload, but that is not taken into account. And when evaluating agencies say that oh, it is not been implemented properly, they should also take into account that even if government officials or government bodies or ministries are trying too hard, it becomes difficult because there are no separate or dedicated human resources or logistic support that is provided for implementation of that policy. So if my first suggestion would be that whenever a policy is framed, it should be thought of as to how it should be implemented, and when it is evaluated, these things are also should be taken into account. And when we score ministries on like in IT scores or on evaluation, we should also see how much logistic support those ministries have. My second message is that there should be an online dashboard for proper monitoring and evaluation so that critical data can be collected and it is like displayed in real time. This has all by Professor Hema and Alok Mishra sir. So I'll not go into a lot about that. Third thing that I came across when I studied at Harvard University, there was a course on policy formulation and policy reform, and it was told to us that policy evaluation and monitoring should be done in real time, or it should be envisaged to be done in a real time. And it was, and an example of Mexico's Progresa policy was given, wherein what happened is that when the policy was scaled up from say like 2 states to 5 states to 7 states, the other states in which the policy was not implemented, they were used as controls to see how this policy was performing. And this Progresa policy, just to give you an information, it is like a flagship policy of conditional cash transfer, and cash was given to families if their children would go to schools. I also see that when we design those policies so as to avoid, so as to put checks and balances, we try and make the policy very bureaucratic. For example, whenever somebody has to get a pension, he has to show his life certificate that he is living. And when we make situations like these, we should also always remember that there would be so many people for whom it would be very, very difficult to like go to government offices and get these certificates, given that their condition is not well, they might not be healthy, they would have to arrange transport. Can something be done to like, at the same time, we should take into account that there should be like corruption is taken care of and a dead person is not getting pension. But at the same time, a person who is living, if he gets, for example, if he has not, the current rules are such that he has to give a living certificate for both these years. Now, suppose if I am living in 2020 and I furnish a certificate of 2020, then it should automatically be used for 2019 pension disbursal. But I have seen my relative who is like struggling with getting these living certificates. So that is one thing that we should take into account. I also feel that when we evaluate policies, when we make policies, the public participation should be encouraged. For example, right, there have been efforts in this direction, and we should continue to do that. For example, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, they made a blueprint of digital health records, and they uploaded it on their website, and they asked for suggestions as to how can this policy be improved. So whenever we are making a policy, we should try and take inputs of the public or of the consumers of those policy schemes, so that their concerns are taken into account. And this I particularly see a lot happening in the Western world, wherein there is a lot of deliberation, there is a lot of discussion on how these schemes um, they are made and they are implemented. For example, the Obamacare scheme that was there, there was an article which I was reading. The president of United States, Barack Obama, he himself published an article in an academic journal, and he listed out that these are the things that we should take into account. So there he mentioned that we should, when we design policies, we should always think of some stories. When we are designing policies for public distribution of food, we should always think of like the consumers, like the widows who would need that, who would need the ration, how to make things easier for them. At the same time, how to take corruption into account. It was said in the beginning that all the evaluation agencies, they say the universal truth. But I still believe that we should focus on both basics. A policy, if the evaluation agency finds that this policy is not implemented properly, or it is poorly implemented, and it is because of a universal truth, we should not say that. We should focus on basics also. There might be some other reasons, but like, for example, you have not put the you have not given the dedicated logistic support for implementation of this policy. You have not put an online dashboard for this policy. This is not rocket science. But if an evaluation agency says that this is required, then I think that may be a game changer. We should give attention to these universal truth also, because sometimes we take it for granted. A policy should not be too complicated, that I have already touched on. And one more thing is that our policies, it is political for sure, but as bureaucrats, as public individuals, there should be a platform where people can also make suggestions, and they should be taken into account while formulating those policies. But I still believe that we should focus on our basics. That is it from my side, Amitosh and the panel.
Thank you, Vikram, for your presentation. I'm sure that people have learned from your experience and all deliberations which are rest of the speakers have given. We have nominated the time for 1 hour for this webinar. Let us take quickly some of the questions which participants have posed in the question and answer session. I think we should start with the question for Hema ma'am, because this is very pertinent, and starting from the basics, like if somebody wants to come into this field, then what should be the steps he should follow, and what should be the journey for M&E?
Well, for someone who wants to, I think, learn about M&E, it is, I would recommend a little bit of crash reading to understand the concepts. It is, can be fairly technical, can be fairly scientific. So I can give some very basic recommendations of free books on the websites, etc. So learn a little bit about it, and then build your own technical capacity to be able to do M&E. Don't think that one can just simply do an M&E. Build a little bit of technical capacity and then take it from there. Talk to a few people who've done it and then take it from there. So, I mean, it's, I think policy analysis, all of these are fairly technical. So you'll have to learn a little bit of technical capacity.
Right. The question, I think it is open. All the speakers who wanted to take. I think Alok Mishra sir would like to address this thing. when it comes to performing evaluations in the real world of research, mistakes are generally made and they go out. And challenges can be seen unsurmountable. So how these challenges in evaluation can overcome and what are the solutions to these challenges?
Right. Let me come to some of the challenges that that come. You have rightly pointed out, somebody who asked the question, that the real hard work that happens in the field, which is a hard, tough work in terms of everything that you do, from conducting surveys to collecting data, then analyzing it, is a fairly difficult work. Now, somehow the technology has come to our, help. So, say for example, now you have CAPI devices, right? So where the data can be digitally collected and then analysis becomes collating it and analyzing it becomes much more easier. There are certain things that you should be doing in terms of evaluation. I would still think that a lot of data in this country is still sort of lies with the ministries, and that's where, since in India, since these evaluations are mandated by Department of Expenditures, so ministries are generally more forthcoming in providing data and being transparent about it. But it does require an effort, because in ministries people are busy, and the evaluation may not be their first priority. So planning. That's one thing that sort of you require to get over some of these hitches you come through. If you can plan for what then I think you can handle what you don't know. But if you don't even plan for what you know, then even the God can't help. So more in monitoring, evaluation, going to the tough world out there on the field. What matters is that have you planned it? Have you put your theoretical frameworks, theory of change, everything, the kind of indicators that you're looking for? All that research framework has to be in mind. Kind of KII's key informant interviews that you are conducting, the kind of primary surveys you're doing. Let me give you one example. When when COVID sort of came, we were still doing our evaluation. Some of the packages could not sort of had not done the primary data collection, and what we had to do is that we had to go for telephonic sort of interviews. And obviously telephonic interviews are not going to be as great as an in-person interview would be, but over a period of time we realized that they were still giving much better results. So these are certain ways that we try to overcome by better planning, by coming up with alternate ways. Say for example, if a state did not have had a problem in terms of COVID related issues, we chose a different state. Or if a village had an issue, then we chose the adjacent village. So some of these things were problematic. Yes, there was one problem that we still could not overcome. That was of FGDs, that is focus group discussions, because in times of COVID, focus group discussion really become difficult. But except that, we found a way out for most of the problems that were there. But you need to plan, think through it, take advice, take the ministry on the board, then things work out better.
Thank you, sir. I think the next two questions are directed to Hema ma'am. Ma'am, somebody asked that there is a big chance of being biased during monitoring and evaluation at the field. How can we minimize it at field level? I think Alok Mishra sir can also attempt this thing. There is a big chance of being biased during the monitoring and evaluation.
Right. I think, right. I think the way the policymaker can try and minimize the bias is to say that you bring in someone who is credible and someone who is external, and ensure that there is no conflict of interest. Either they don't have sort of a vested interest with, say, the particular ministry that is doing this, or there is no vested interest in terms of continuing this in a particular way. And then I think the person who is receiving the evaluation also needs to have a sharp antenna, which is why I think policymakers and bureaucrats, even if they are not producers of evaluation research, ought to be intelligent consumers of evaluation research. So that if the evaluator is biased, or they think there is some evidence of bias, and that evidence of bias can come through from the way they design the evaluation, from the way they design, say, data collection systems, the kinds of questions that they are being asked. So then I think there has to be checks and balances, right? So don't trust your evaluator blindly. Don't go to someone who you think has an obvious fit from the scheme working or from the scheme not working. Choose a very credible, independent organization. right? Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to, but also be intelligent, ask questions, and don't put your trust blindly in anyone.
Mr. Zari, would you like to add something on this?
Yes, so what we did to sort of, reduce bias, the first thing was that, we have external experts, who have been, who have worked in sectors, their sectors for, close to 30 to 40 years. And so, those experts we have on our panel. Second thing is that we have sector experts, experts in NITI, which sort of help us, if we are going wrong anywhere. And third thing is that, what we do is that even we see, we do tend to consult the ministry on the process part of it, but, we do sort of, expect their suggestions, but, unless they're backed by evidence, we don't accept it. Amitosh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There are a couple of more questions. They are very interesting. So, we have a national evaluation policy because you were showing in your slide. So, would you like to highlight something on it?
Okay, so let me say that national evaluation policy is still not in place, and we are working towards it. But what we wanted to do is that before a national evaluation policy comes into sort of force, or we sort of, we are, already conducting stakeholder consultations. We are sort of, working in collaboration with international sort of organizations. And then getting some of the best practices from different countries. But what we wanted to do is that first create a more kind of acceptance for evidence, more demand for evaluation. And once we have established our credibility in terms of the quality of evaluations, and I did not so much talk about that. What we do is that it's not only the rigorous evaluation we do. We have something like OOMF, that is Output Outcome Framework, monitoring framework. So we have OOMF Note. So that is first level of thing that goes to the ministry, which is reviewed at the level of member Niti Aayog. Then we have performance notes, which are just based on KIIs. Then you have quick evaluation studies. Then you have rigorous evaluation studies. So we want to create this pool of studies, for different schemes, and then sort of then the acceptability for this kind of thing will increase, and then we'll come up with a national evaluation policy. So this is still a work in progress, but yes, we propose to do it in near future.
Thank you, sir. In fact, I just wanted to highlight that NPC is also having a division called as PRIME, is Productivity Integrated Monitoring and Evolution, and the Delhi office where currently you are sitting right now, they are working extensively in monitoring and evolution. In fact, the recent project with the United Nations Environmental Program has been, it was a great hit in the country. So that is something which NPC is also doing. Next question is again to you, sir. Actions are being taken by DMEO after the scheme.
Okay, so after evaluation of the scheme, so once what we do is that after the evaluation has been done, we make the presentation at different levels. So one level of presentation is inside the ministry, in the Niti Aayog itself, to the members and the vice chairman, and then their presentations before the secretary, and obviously that reports goes to the Finance Commission. Now what happens is that now the Finance Commission has made it mandatory that any scheme which has to flow into the next sort of Finance Commission cycle has to be evaluated. Third-party independent evaluation has to be done, and that's where it will start sort of the budgetary allocations for schemes which are working. Basically, ultimate aim of evaluation is that what is working and what is not. So what is working, we keep on sort of increasing allocations for it, so that overall impact on human welfare increases. And so then it will go to the Finance Commission. Finance Commission, in consultation with DOE, will then take call on how the budgetary resources are to be allotted. So that way it will have that kind of implications. Now once those changes are going to be sort of accommodated in those policy changes, then we'll study it that how many of those sort of changes have been accommodated, and that will be done subsequently, and we hope to do it that things are going to be good. Quite a few of the recommendations, because we're trying to do a pretty good job, so should get accepted and should get actually be adopted through some kind of policy changes, and that's what for the benefit of everybody.
Okay, thank you. To Hema ma'am, if what measures are to be taken for the group of people to whom the policy is not applied during the RCT treatment? So in that case, is there any kind of are there to alleviate these problems, or otherwise, it is an unethical way of continuing with the policy?
Right. So I think that is one of the major challenges that policymakers face when they are trying to do a randomized controlled trial. The premise of the randomized controlled trial is that the policy is done on the intervention. Some group of people get the intervention and another group doesn't get it, right? Because you're trying to see the impact of this intervention. So the question that you ask is a very important one. And I think there isn't a particularly clear answer. It has to depend on the context, right? So if there is a famine and you're distributing rations, you don't want to do an RCT at that point, right? Everybody who is needy has to get it, right? A situation like a pandemic, you don't want to do an RCT at this point. You just ensure everybody. What you have to do is maybe universalize it or have your targeting policies in place so that you're minimizing errors of inclusion or exclusion. If it is universal, you try and set it up in such a way so that there is a self-selection mechanism so that only those who really need it will come, like the NREGA kind of work, because obviously a rich person in a rural area is not interested in the hard manual labor that NREGA is giving you, right? But in other cases, when there is if you are thinking of a long-term program, and Vikram talked about Progressa, which was done with an RCT, what you can do is you say that it is a staggered measure, right? You're not totally cutting off this control population. All you're saying is, I'm going to delay it. And maybe that delay can be minimized. So in the interest of evaluation, you won't say, I'll delay it by 3 years. Though an evaluator who is not thinking about welfare, well-being as the top priority might say the impact will actually take only 3 years to come. So let's stagger it. You don't have to do that necessarily. So there has to be a process of clear communication, right? And sometimes staggering work because the government is also constrained on resources, both human resources as well as financial resources, right? So NREGA in this country also did not start off with all the districts, right? It started off with the 100 districts. And then it was staggered and moved on to the rest of the country. So there are ways. So it depends on the need, on the kind of intervention, on the population that is being looked at. There are ways in which you can. So to try and minimize some of the ethical issues that arise with it. If there is an ethical quandary, then you would, I think evaluation then becomes secondary. Your policies should be for enhancing the well-being of the citizens. That has to take priority.
We are about to reach the end of our session. I'll take a couple of more questions because there are so many I cannot take all. But this goes to Alok sir. Maybe 5 more minutes only. Alok sir, stops us in taking stakeholders on board during policy planning stage in India?
Well, the Professor Hema could have responded to that, better. But let me sort of come with, what happens when a policy is being made. Please understand that the kind of policy imperatives nowadays are in the age of 24-hour social media and the kind of media we have. The policy can't wait for you can't go through a rigorous academic policy analysis, come up with optimum first best or the second best solutions and then get it evaluated. Those take much longer time. In the kind of world that we are, the policy entrepreneur, my understanding is that bureaucrat is a policy entrepreneur, and he has to be prepared with a bit of analysis and policy options beforehand. The fact that that is not done is because maybe there may be a capacity sort of related issues. But bureaucrat as a policy entrepreneur needs to have done this thinking through it, because the kind of environment that we are in does not allow for that long process of policy analysis and then sort of understand that what works or not in mean, doesn't work. Nowadays, policies are just introduced, sometimes not even at the pilot level. Rather, they are sort of expanded, in quite a hurry to the rest of the country, because the kind of challenges are, I mean, of that kind, and the kind of pressures that both the bureaucrats and the politicians have, they are also, much bigger than they were. And these pressures get more amplified in a democratic system and with the kind of, media, we have. So that's what, makes it, not possible for us to have that long, long kind of process of policy, the way, some of us would prefer.
I think I'll take this as a last question. To have suitable methodology designed for evaluating, monitoring, and evaluation reports, and engagement of independent institutions in such a process.
Yes, this is Amitosh for me, or
I think you are the one who can respond to it, sir.
Okay, so what we are doing is that we are sort of developing some kind of SOPs as to understand that how these evaluation, I mean, first the quality of the evaluation reports that has come out, and we have tried to ensure it at every stage. You'll be surprised to know that I mean, even when the primary data is collected, there are separate primary data collection sort of presentations are scheduled, and that is going to come out as a separate small report also to understand that whether primary data was sort of I mean, all kind of biases and hygiene related issues in the data quality that we get, everything is seen beforehand, and thereafter once the final reports come out in certain sort of I mean parameters, we are going to evaluate that how that quality of report has been. And somehow the major outcome of whether a report is great depends on that how much of its recommendations get confirmed or get accepted and lead to policy changes. So all those things we are going to follow it up, and this is what everybody does. I mean, I was citing example of Dr. Gonzalo, who was here in India just about 4 months back, and he also highlighted that the same kind of process that he tends to sort of undertake in terms of how many of the sort of recommendations that that I mean ultimately get translated into policy changes. So that's what we are going to do as well.
More and it was really a very interesting discussion, and I could see a lot of questions still there, but maybe we will be able to address them at a later stage at some other point of time, because maybe we are going to organize some other related webinars on monitoring and evaluation in future. With this, I would like to say my sincere thanks to especially to you, sir, because you have taken out time and visited our headquarters right now. So thank you to you, sir. My thanks are indebted to Professor Hema Swaminathan. She is the one who taught us the policy evaluation, and I consider, after being taught by her, that this is really a subject which all the people who are into the policy domain should consider revisiting it. And to Vikram,
she taught me also.
Thank you. Vikram is a dear friend, and since when we visited US, and I could be able to identify a lot of policy gaps US taking care. So that's why I invited Vikram, because he was there for one long year. He had a better exposure to the environment there. So thank you, Vikram, for giving your inputs in this webinar. So I would request some last comment from our Director General, sir, before we close.
Thank you, Amitosh. Very good point which has emerged out of this discussion. I'm thankful to our Guruji first, that Dr. Hema Swaminathan. Guru always has the prime place.
Thank you.
And then our colleague Alok Misra ji, and another colleague, Mr. Vikram Pagadia ji. Actually, we all must think that where we are leading to. Somehow, somewhere, we are losing our focus and we are deviating ourselves. Because I believe that demo is the right place who can do all such things. Let me tell you, I will be able to influence Mr. Alok Misra, but it will not be to that extent which I can do otherwise. So No, to that level, my influence will be scattered. So that's why I'm of the firm opinion that this monitoring and evaluation, which otherwise should be at least 1% of the total financial outlay. Let me tell you, if it is 15 lakh crore, 10 lakh crore in central government, it is a fact. 5 lakh crore, I am guessing, out of all the 30 states, 29, 28 states. But 1% means 15,000 crore. So it is a very big amount and very big things at stake. So there can be a very good system of doing it on continuous basis. And several people, several stakeholders can be a party to such kind of system, whether this system is working well or not. With that, I thank everybody. I thank all my participants, and I hope that there will be good takeaway from this kind of. Thank you, madam. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. And to all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you for the motivation.
Thanks,
And I
Amitosh.
thank all the participants. We have just around 90 participants. And I would like to especially thank my other colleagues at NPC Gandhinagar, our regional director, Shrish Paliwal. He kept us doing a lot of work so that we were able to generate right kind of interest in the audience. My other colleague, Mr. Ashish Sahu, he really worked hard in propagating the message to all the audience and my other colleagues. So with this, we today's webinar, and I thank everyone for their support. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.